You may have heard a lot of different sentences, from being sent to school to going to jail. You may have even heard of cruel history words like burning, stoning, and hanging. But throughout history, people have thought of even worse and more bizarre ways to torture people they think have done wrong. The vivid and harsh methods used to force statements, create fear, or give punishments are what make this shadow stand out. Here are the worst torture methods in human history. Number 1. The Brazen Bull. This scary tool for torture, called the Brazen Bull, was invented in ancient Greece. This evil device was made by Pear of Athens, a metalworker and inventor who lived in the 6th century BC. Phalaris, the ruler of Sicily, told Acragas to make it. The design was meant to make a way to kill people that would scare those who disagreed with the tyrant's rule. It was a life-sized bronze figure of a bull with a door on one side. It was called the Brazen Bull. The victims were put inside the bull through this door before it was locked. A fire was made under the bull, which slowly heated the metal until it was red hot. As the temperature inside the bull's cavity rose, the victim was in terrible pain. The victim's pain could be heard as scary, eerie, bellowing sounds that sounded like a real bull's cry because of how the bull's head was made. People who saw or heard what happened were even more scared because of this scary element. The worst thing that happened to the victim of the Brazen Bull is that it was frightening. As the bronze heated up, the crowded area turned into a terrible chamber of unbearable pain. It would sizzle when the victim's skin touched the hot metal, giving them terrible burns. The mix of extreme heat and poor ventilation led to a slow and painful death. The Brazen Bull was one of the cruelest ways to torture people in history because of how painful it was and how bad it felt to be slowly roasted alive. Number 2. The Iron Maiden. The horrible, well-known Iron Maiden torture device was first used in Europe in the Middle Ages. No one knows exactly where it came from in history, but in the late 18th century, it became famous as a tool of fear and torture. Authorities mostly used this evil device to get statements, punish suspects, and make people afraid of becoming criminals. The Iron Maiden looked like a tall, vertical trunk or tomb. Its insides were covered with jagged, scary spikes. Once the person was inside, they were carefully restrained so that they could only stand up and not move much. When the maiden's door shut, the spikes, which were designed to avoid important organs, went through the victim's skin and left them in tremendous pain. The spikes were put on purposely to make the victim suffer longer instead of killing them right away. What the victim went through inside the Iron Maiden was unbearably painful. As the spikes slowly went through the body, they caused unbearable pain. The spikes kept the victim from moving and held their weight. Over time, the spikes would get deeper. The subject was getting more and more uncomfortable because they couldn't move around easily. The Iron Maiden was one of the worst ways to hurt someone physically and mentally in history. The mental pain of knowing they were going to die made it even worse. Number 3. The rack. You can find the rack's roots in early modern and ancient Europe. It came about at a time when different kinds of physical torture were being developed to get people to confess and punish those who were thought to have done wrong. The rack was used well into the 18th century. The earliest records of its use are from the late 1400s. The rack was a simple tool that worked incredibly well. It was made up of a square frame with cords or chains on each end and a roller in the middle. The victim's wrists and legs were tied to the rollers, which held them to the frame. As the rollers were turned, the torturer stretched the victim's limbs in different directions, which caused a lot of pain. The body's mechanical stress often damaged muscles badly, broke bones, and threw joints out of place. The painful feeling of being stretched out was made worse by the scary thought that the abuser might keep pressing on until the victim gave in or died. A common way to get people who are being accused to confess was to put them on the rack. The people who tortured thought that the unbearable pain and the fear of more torture would make the person confess to any crimes real or imagined. This method worked especially well when police needed information or confessions of crime. This is why people who wanted to get confessions liked the rack. Number 4. The Judas Cradle. In the Middle Ages and early modern periods, the Judas Cradle was used as a form of punishment and to force people to confess. The Judas Cradle was made to be an inhumane way to torture people, and it lived up to its scary image. The person in the Judas Cradle would be put in a dangerous and uncomfortable situation. Usually something pointy and pyramid-shaped made of metal or wood was hung above them. The pointy end was directly at their genitalia or anus. The subject was slowly lowered onto the very tip of the pyramid, often with their hands and feet tied together. As the body's weight pressed down on the sharp point, it went deep and hurt people. Since moving or fighting would only make the victim's situation worse, trying to ease the pain would also make it worse. The design of the Judas Cradle made sure that the victim would be tortured for a long time, as their body weight and tiredness made the pain worse. The Judas Cradle not only hurt their bodies, but it also did a lot of damage to their mental health. The knowledge that people who were torturing them could keep hurting them forever, the feeling of helplessness, and the anticipation of the fall from the steep peak created a scary mental environment. As a form of coercion and control, the Judas Cradle has psychological effects that can be seen in the fact that victims often admit to crimes they may not have committed just to stop the pain. Number 5. The Pear of Anguish. It is also known as the Spanish pear or the choke pear. The Pear of Anguish is a scary and cruel torture tool from the Middle Ages and early modern periods. The evil genius who made this gadget intended to hurt and embarrass the people who used it. It was made up of a pear-shaped piece of metal or wood that had parts that could be extended by turning a key. The device was constructed with the sole intent of causing unbearable mental and physical pain. The Pear of Anguish was put into different parts of the body, depending on whether it was meant to be a display of shame or punishment. There were different kinds of pear devices, like oral, anal, and vaginal pears, and each one was made to cause a certain kind of pain. When the key was turned, the tool expanded inside the chosen opening and caused unbearable pain as it stretched and sometimes tore the tissues around it. You can make the victim's pain worse by changing how much the key was turned. The Pear of Anguish has been used in many different ways throughout history, most of the time to punish and humiliate people. It was sometimes used to punish people accused of slander or sexual crimes. For example, female victims were shamed and punished in public by having their vaginal pears cut off. The anal pear, on the other hand, was put on its side and faced the male victims. Along with hurting the victim physically, the Pear of Anguish was meant to put them down and shame them, reinforcing social rules and authority. Number 6. Chinese water torture. Chinese water torture is a very scary form of torture that is surprisingly easy to do. Different from other types of physical torture, this one uses water drops to hurt people. The subject is usually held down and forced to lie flat or sit with their head still. A bottle full of water is put on top of the victim's forehead, and every so often, a small droplet of water falls on the same part of the forehead. The method is easy to understand, but the effects are very disturbing when put together. The Chinese practice of water torture causes a lot of mental pain because of the constant rhythmic drops of water. The person suffers from worry and a sense of helplessness. When the single droplet hits the same spot of water over and over, its power grows over time. People who have experienced this say it's annoying because the water droplets feel like a steady hammer blow to the same tiny spot on the forehead, even though it's not dangerous at first. Even though it wasn't as popular in Chinese history as some other types of torture, it has been recorded that it has happened. Several accounts say that it is used in psychological warfare during wars and hostilities. Researchers studying sensory isolation and experimental psychologically have also discussed the method. Is there any torture method you think we should have put onto this list? And if you'd pick, which one would you say is the worst of them all? Let's hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.